Something else that's a little silly. He appears on the February 22nd, 99 Raw as a masked man and throws Bart Gunn off the stage. What was the plan for this going to be? Was Steve going to get a pay-per-view win over Bart at some point? Or what's the thinking?
I'm not sure what the thinking was. And I don't know if there was any long-term plan with that deal. Obviously, the fact that, you could always give Bart the credit for hurting Doc and the leg and all that stuff, the leg, the hamstring, all that shit, the quad. But I don't know what the end game was of that deal was. They're going to, because a match with Doc and Bart Gunn, and all due respect to both guys, just doesn't light up the marquee in my estimation.
No, it doesn't. But the thing is, it's weird because it feels like they're at least trying to give him some sort of a push here on the March 15th, 99 episode of Sunday Night Heat. And again, I realize we're on Sunday Night Heat, but Steve wins in a handicap match against the Hardy Boys. I mean, obviously the Hardy Boys aren't the mega stars here in March of 99 that they would become just later that same year. But my goodness, a handicap win over these guys, but he's not long for this world. He's released at the end of April 99, ironically with Bart Gunn and several others. This feels like, just a pattern for WWE. They get through WrestleMania and then sometime in April, a lot of people are getting their walking papers, huh?
Yeah. It's kind of a tradition, and you got to purge your roster from time to time. Wrestling fans love new things. They love new things that they can emotionally invest within. And, I'm not, the recent WWE layoffs certainly were disheartening for a lot of the talents and their families. But look, it's a necessary evil, unfortunately, that's going to happen from time to time, no matter the physical or the fiscal, the financial health of a company. WWE is a very healthy company financially. Their quarterly statement the last time was positive. The stock went up. That's what they expected to happen, and so the value of the company increased. So they weren't really any major financial issues, based on the numbers, the public information of a publicly traded company. But that's not unusual. That was the hardest one I ever had to do release wise. There are a lot of them. None of them are fun. None of them are, good experiences by and large. All you can do is talk like I'm talking to you right now, and don't be a bully. Don't be an asshole. Have empathy and understanding. Let the talents talk. They're going to vent. They're going to be pissed off. And you got to, just like Vince would say, you got to learn I'm sure Bruce has said this, you got to learn to acquire the taste for eating shit. No, it ain't fun. It's never going to taste good, but you better learn to at least tolerate it, because that's what's going to happen here a lot. So that was the deal there. I wrote in my book, Under the Black Hat, that, Jan was a big help in that regard, because she saw how conflicted I was. I mean, Conrad, I was to the point where I didn't know if I still really wanted to do that job as the head of talent relations. I just felt like we were making an erroneous decision, and we could have got some mileage out of Doc if it had been prioritized. But again, when you're older and you have injury issues, notwithstanding a very expensive reattached quad, now you're damaged goods. You don't have youth going for you. I understand the logic of doing it, but it was just the practical application of it. It broke my heart because I knew when we let Doc go, that quite honestly, and I never told him this, obviously, that it was pretty much over. He's going to piecemeal things together here, there, and yon as best he could, but he's never going to be the same old Dr. Death, the invincible battering ram, a monster of a man. Those days were gone. His body was starting to break down. The style in Japan, the travel, Doc's lifestyle sometimes didn't do him any favors. But I knew at that point in time that I'm not only releasing him, I'm also probably, for the lack of a better term, ending his career for all. And then, of course, he shows up in WCW. But
we'll get there. Let's talk about that. You talked about worried about ending his career. The guy's only 38. I mean, when he's released from WWE, is the same age as Kofi Kingston and Finn Balor today. 38 is not old.
No, but the damage, the wear and tear, the mileage on that motor, and I don't know. He had torn biceps and torn triceps. Now he has this quad issue he's got to deal with. How's that going to hold up a surgery? It just, it's not old, but he had more mileage on him, and because of all that Japanese stuff, it takes a toll on you. Talk to Stan Hansen or any of these guys.
Meltzer would write, the biggest shock on the list was Williams, who was never really given a chance. Williams, 38, was the top foreign star for All Japan when he was lured away last year with the idea of being an opponent on top for his namesake, Steve Austin. Since Williams was going to be marketed without a gimmick other than his toughness, the Brawl for All concept was put into place as a shoot, largely as a way to get him over as a legitimate tough guy and threat for Austin. In hindsight, the idea was a huge miscalculation, since Williams was a very good amateur wrestler, being the only pro wrestler in history to be a 4-time NCAA tournament place winner, but he was never a boxer, and Brawl for All entailed a lot of boxing. How it turned out was something entirely different, as he destroyed his hamstring in the second round against Gunn, and trying to fight with one leg was knocked out in the third. He was out of action for months due to the injury, and still at this point is nowhere close to 100%. He was given that lame gimmick of being a masked Japanese wrestler, which lasted all of 1 week. It was so bad. And then became the protege of Jim Ross, when the idea was for Ross to do something akin to a heel manager. But with Ross having maneuvered his way back into the broadcast booth, it left Williams with no spot. Word has it that Vince McMahon was fairly insistent on Williams having no future with the company, since the WWF is so heavily based on looks and acting ability. And while Williams is probably still one of the strongest men in the company, he doesn't have a pretty physique and is a notoriously poor talker. Plus his ring style is quite a bit tougher from the Japan background than the company is used to, which isn't flashy by American standards. So in Meltzer's observation, this is a Vince McMahon call. He's insistent there's no future with the company. Do you remember having detailed discussions with Vince? I mean, you sort of insinuated a minute ago that you started to question your role even in talent relations with a cut like this.
Yeah, we had a lot of talks about it, and Vince just had no more patience. The signing of Dr. Death was the JR and Bruce Pritchard deal. And of course, Bruce and I got some grief over it because we made the wrong decision, as if we were going to know that he was going to rip his hamstring to pieces.
Right.
And so I felt like we cut him short. They had more, even though he was not the Dr. Death of old, he was still good enough to have a passable program with Stone Cold. Again, but Steve needed a mouthpiece, and we didn't provide that. And that would have been a solution to this perceived issue. But I had long talks with Vince about it, to the point that, he'd get a little angry at me for, being abrasive, I guess, or insistent or uncompromising, which always caused some consternation between Vince and I. But I thought we were doing the wrong thing. And my judgment, to be perfectly honest, and I try to be honest with everything, was a lot egocentric. I wanted Steve to have that one last run so he could cap off his, with all these injuries mounting and the wear and tear on his body. God dang, would it be nice to give him one last run so he could go out on a high note. And he never got that opportunity, which I thought was a mistake.
Well, there's no debate about that. You wrote about this in your book that you were really filled with anxiety and dread. You knew it had to be done, and you got some words of encouragement from Jan before you made the phone call to let your old pal know that you had to let him go.
Yeah. Her issues were, or points she made were so valid. Be sensitive, honey, take care, talk to him like you would if he was family, because he is to you. And he was. Being an only child affects us all in a lot of different ways, man. And so when you get these relationships with another guy, like a little brother type thing that you can kind of live vicariously through, and you've been with him every step of the journey. I used to get calls from Steve when he'd be back in the States, talking excitedly about his last tour of Japan and how they're using him. And, I beat Misawa, and, then the tag success with Gordy was pretty damn amazing. So he'd call and give me the updates and how you doing? And, we'd talk OU football or whatever it was. So we always had a close relationship, and maybe too close. I learned a lesson there that when I let people go with the most earnest and honest way I knew how, and that was to listen, give them the bad news first, and then move the conversation on from there. But then none of them were ever easy. But when you have to let somebody go that you perceive, because I could see where he was. I could see now how, he was sore, and he had issues with his shoulders and his knees and all this stuff. This football. God dang, Conrad. Here's a guy that goes from D1 school, Division I school is pretty damn impressive, and you go from football where you're a star and you're playing in bowl games. Then when you get back from the bowl trip, you go right to the wrestling room. That was his life for 4 years.
Right.
And a lot of guys could not handle that issue. And he worked through injuries, soreness, dropping weight to 285, all these things. Was just, it was just, you knew this body had taken a toll. But he was so damn tough, and he was so hell-bent on not selling it that you never heard him complain. But all the while you knew that something was different about him because of his experiences in Japan. And I'm not knocking Japan by any stretch of the imagination, but the style there, for as long as he was there, working with the caliber of talent that he was working with, who are all basically stiffer than hell, and so he retaliated, he reciprocated, was going to hurt you. Somewhere along the way, the cumulative effect of those contacts, those shots, the bumps, the physicality, going to take advantage or take its toll on anybody, including the seemingly impregnable Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Steve had said that he originally planned to be Triple H's spot before his release. Much of what was previously booked for Steve was eventually given to Triple H, most notably the segment on October 4th, 1999, when Triple H would attack you. That would have been when Steve was going to start his feud with Austin. And because the segment was planned for Steve, this was supposed to be the moment where he would become a heel, as you were going to manage him as a face up until that point. That's all what Dr. Death had said at some point. Do you remember some of that creative being discussed?
Not to that detail, no. But it's not beyond the realm of comprehension, because the original idea that Bruce and I sold Vince on was that Austin was our big commodity. Austin was getting just on the cusp of being the biggest star ever in wrestling, and he needed quality wins against opponents that the fans were not tired of seeing, or they were used to seeing. So Vince knew the game plan, and he signed off on it. But unfortunately, the Brawl for All injury just curtailed everything. And then you bring a guy back, and now he's almost a year older, and Dr. Death got every bad break that you could imagine, from injuries to falling out of grace to creative. And sometimes, and I had this pushback before, where I would override creative with talents. Great example is, wanting to bring Brock Lesnar in too early. And I said, hell, he can't protect his opponents, Vince. So what are we going to do when we go to court? He names somebody because he don't know how strong he is. So that was the advancement of Lesnar was slowed a little bit so his skill set could catch up to his potential. That's all that was. Being responsible, and not put him in the ring with somebody that he might hurt inadvertently, obviously, not on purpose, obviously, but that's where you were there. So, but Doc was a JR and Bruce hire. And sometimes that didn't fall well with some in creative, because he wasn't their guy. He was our guy.
Let's talk about November of 99. Our guy shows up in WCW. He's managed by Ed Ferrara, who is portraying the Oklahoma character. He's obviously doing a parody of you, and it's not very polite, but this is, not just Ed Ferrara doing it. He's got one of your best friends in tow with him. Did you know it before you saw it? I mean, did Steve give you a heads up, and how did you feel when you saw it?
No, the sad part about letting somebody go is it affects your relationship. And there was a time there, where we were not communicating, because I was perceived as the bad guy, and it affected our friendship, and affected a long, long relationship with a guy I looked at as a little brother. And that was sad.